In today's video, I'm going to show you how I used the space under the seat where the factory toolkit and manual go to add myself a little 4-terminal fuse box that's controlled by a relay and protected by a circuit breaker. That way I can add additional electrical circuits for accessories like a GPS, a phone charger, a radio, extra lights, hand grip warmers, all those kind of electrical accessories we all like to add. And this way I get to do it easily and properly, all protected by fuses. So, most of the components I managed to fit in the space in the middle underneath the seat where the factory toolkit goes. The heart of the system is this little 4-pack fuse panel. I got that at Princess Auto. It's got a little plastic cover. You can see there are 4 slots for fuses there. And the whole thing is powered by this automotive relay. I won't go into great detail on how the relay works here in the video, but the details are available on my website, billavista.com, and then you click on ATV Tech, and we'll go into great detail about that. But basically it's a small remote electrically powered switch. So what happens is the main power for the relay comes from the battery positive terminal. So I have that wire here connected up, and that runs through this circuit breaker, and the circuit breaker is sized to protect the total capacity of the fuse panel. In this case I can't see pulling more than about 40 amps through this, so I've got a 40 amp circuit breaker, and that's the power from the battery comes in, and then it comes out, goes into the relay, and there it stops until you turn the relay on. So what I've done, and I'll show you exactly how in a bit later in the video, but when you turn the key on now, that activates this relay, closes the switch inside, and then power comes out of the relay on this other red wire and powers the main power terminal of the fuse panel. And then from there, power flows through the individual fuses, and then there's the 4 terminals. So 2 I'm not using right now, I've just covered them with terminals to keep them protected. And then the other 2, I will show you where they are wired to. But essentially I've got one, the yellow one is powering my GPS, and the green one is a spare, but I just ran it up to the front of the quad while I was running the other wires so that it's ready there for me to use. And the other connection for the relay is a ground. It needs a ground to operate. That's this green wire you see here, and that runs through. I drilled a couple of small holes here to keep the wires neat and tidy. And that green attaches right to the negative terminal of the battery. The only other wire is this black wire, is the control signal, and that I wired into the stock 12-volt accessory, the cigarette lighter accessory, because it's powered by the key, and I'll show you how I did that in a moment. So those are the basics of the system. Now I'll show you some of the other components in the wiring. So another component that I added was a small grounding block up under the console, and that allows me to pick up ground connection for any accessories that I add up near the front and on the handlebars, which is where they usually go. And that's run to the main grounding tab on the frame. That's where the factory grounds are attached. So I added an extra one. There was an existing hole, so I used a small bolt and added this 10 gauge brown grounding wire, ran along next to all the stock wiring harness, and you can see here also we pick up the yellow and the green from the fuse panel, and I just zip tied those closely, and you can see follow that along and ran them up next to the stock wiring harness and then alongside the clear vent tubes, and that's how they run underneath the coolant, or beside the coolant bottle there, and underneath the pod, and then we'll pick it up on the other side at the pod. So here's the grounding block that I mentioned. This is the brown 10 gauge wire that runs from the main grounding plate, and it's actually a circuit breaker, but what I did is I added this small little plate between the terminals, essentially turning it into a junction block, and that way I've got 2 posts here that I can add any number of grounds to, And I just used a couple of aluminum rivets and riveted it to the side of the pod support here, and it doesn't get in the way of the gauges, and the cover still goes on and off just like factory, so I've got easy access to ground. And then the yellow wire that came from the fuse panel, that's currently being used to power my GPS, so you can see here's where it attaches. There'll be details on my website of what this little apparatus is. It's basically a small converter that takes the 12 volt DC from the fuse panel and converts it to a 5 volt USB interface, because that's what my GPS needs. There'll be details on the website about that, but you can see how that just tucks down in there nice and neat. And then I mentioned the green wire as a spare. That's just wrapped up here. You can see, again, tucks down in there, and that's ready to power heated grips or a phone charger or whatever it is that I add next. And meanwhile it keeps tucked down under there. So that's where the power comes to, and it's all nice and convenient up near the handlebars where you need it, and easy to add things later on. Now we'll swap to a view of the other side, and I'll show you where I picked up that relay control signal from the factory 12 volt power accessory outlet. So here we are looking at the left hand side underneath the pod, and you can see the two connections here. That's for the 12 volt accessory plug. The red one is the power, and that power comes on through the factory wiring harness only when you turn the ignition key on. And I wanted the same behavior for my relay that powers the fuse panel, so all the accessories come on and off with the key. So all I did was I spliced into that connection, and I took a small wire from there and ran it back to that black wire on the relay, and that's what turns the relay on. It's not a big deal because it takes probably less than a milliamp to actually power the relay, so I'm not really affecting the output of the accessory or the current capability of the 12 volt accessory plug. And we'll just come around on this side now and have a look, and I'll show you where I ran that wire. Here we are on the left side of the bike, and this is the 12 volt accessory plug. And so the wires that we just saw are on the back side of there, and the one that I spliced into the positive side, I ran down here along the factory wiring harness, you can see, and then it comes along here, wraps around, and then I've got a connector here so that I can take that line apart if I need to. I drilled another small hole in the plastic tray just to run that wire through here, keep it nice and neat. And then I used a couple of little sticky pads and zip ties. You can get these at Home Depot or other hardware stores. Again, to keep the wiring neat, especially since the seat comes on and off a bunch. And then that's the control wire that goes into the relay. So when the key gets turned on, this black wire gets 12 volts positive applied. That closes the electromagnetic switch inside the relay here. And then when that closes, 12 volts comes from the battery, through the red wire again, through the circuit breaker, into the relay, out of the relay to the fuse panel, and obviously through the fuses, and back through the wiring up to the front of the bike, and then that's what powers my accessories. You can see here on the right handlebar, this is my GPS, and this is the other end of the USB cord that was all taped together under the console, and that's what puts the power into my Garmin GPS. So here I've got the voltmeter hooked up, and I'll just show you a couple of things about how it works. So if we test the battery terminal, obviously we should get about 12.5 volts. We put the probe there on the positive terminal, 12.3 something there. And then if we move our probe over to the circuit breaker, we should get voltage at both sides of that. That's one side, and then the other side. We get voltage there. But because the ignition key is not yet on, we should not get voltage here to the fuse panel. So virtually no voltage there. And then what happens is, if we turn the key on, the relay closes and the fuse panel should be powered. So I'll just turn the key on now. You can hear the fuel pump run there. So now when I come back over, I should have voltage present at the fuse panel. It's a little low there because the engine's not running but the key is on. So we'll just start the machine now and double check the voltage. So now with the bike running, again we'll check the voltage at the fuse panel. There. And we've got 14 or so volts, which is about right with the charging circuit in operation. And then once again, when we turn the key off, obviously the engine stops and we power down the fuse panel and any accessories connected to it, obviously. So basically what that means is we can prevent leaving accessories on and accidentally discharging the battery. That's why they're all hooked to that ignition key through the 12-volt accessory wire. And that's about it for today's video. Thanks very much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.